Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks again for joining me today. In a recent video I posted, we looked at how driving lessons and the theory test and the driving test were all going to start to resume in the not too distant future. Clearly driving lessons, we're able to start to conduct those from the 4th of July. Also in that guidance video, I mentioned that DVSA would be releasing revised guidance and advice on how the theory test and the driving test would be administered. That advice has come out this morning, so in this video we'll have a look at how the theory test and the driving test will be administered in line with the new social distancing measures. Okie dokie, let's go. So let's start off by looking at the theory test first of all. We heard last week that theory tests will be up and running by this weekend, the 4th of July, but with additional social measures in place. So like I mentioned, the changes have been released today, and here are the changes that will be taking place. So first of all, floor markings will be placed on the floor to keep people separate and still adhere to the 2-metre ruling. There will be additional spacing between the desks in the theory test centre area, so again making sure that there's sufficient space. There will be extra cleaning taking place before every test, so again cleaning the keyboard, the mouse and the monitor. Protective screens have been put up in the reception area, so when you arrive there'll be a protective screen between you and the staff that work there. And hand sanitizer is available for when you arrive, during your test and leaving your test. The staff will wear face covering and gloves if it's appropriate for them to do so. You need to arrive alone, and where possible wear face coverings, but you'll be asked to remove the face covering for your ID check. So I guess a lot of those new measures are things perhaps that we expected to be enforced and not necessarily much of a surprise. With regards to face coverings, yes, the advice is to wear it if possible, but if there's a medical reason that prevents you, then clearly obviously go by those rules. Also, the guidance does state there are some occasions when you must not go for your theory test, and those new rules are: if you or someone that you live with have symptoms of COVID-19, and again just to reiterate, those symptoms are high temperature, a new or continuous cough, or a loss of or change to your taste or smell. If you have been notified by the NHS Test and Trace Service that you have been in contact again with somebody who had symptoms, or if you have entered the UK or returned to the UK in the last 14 days. One thing as well that's come out in the guidance is that if you do develop symptoms on the day of your theory test, or maybe just before your theory test, you're able to cancel and rebook your theory test free of charge. Normally, if you book quite close to the date of your theory test, you will be charged, but under the current situation, again, there will be no charge. Another thing to bear in mind as well, if you remember a few months ago that there were going to be some slight amendments to the multiple choice section of the theory test, and those changes were the case studies at the end of your multiple choice section were going to change into a short video to watch and then answer some questions on what you see. That has now been put on hold for the foreseeable future, but at some point those questions will be brought into the theory test. So let's take the driving test now. So we heard last week that from the 22nd of July, driving tests will be going ahead again. However, if you had booked your test prior to lockdown, no doubt you will have received an email or will be receiving an email just alerting you to the fact that your test is currently on hold, and that you'll be receiving another email inviting you to rebook your test at a suitable date and time in the not too distant future, hopefully. Okay, so let's now have a look at some of the changes that will be taking place when it comes to your driving test and some of the things that you need to be aware of. Okay, so in terms of some of the new social distancing measures, when arriving at the test centre, you can only arrive 5 minutes before your test time. You cannot use the test centre, waiting area or toilet, again to minimise contact and keep social distancing rules at bay. Some of the social distancing rules now include the fact that examiners will be wearing face coverings and that a limited number of people will be able to arrive at the test centre at any one time. Your instructor will not be able to sit in the back of the car and observe your test. And a really important one that you need to bear in mind is that you must wear a face cover unless there is a good reason that you can't wear one. Now, some of those reasons include you have a physical impairment or a disability that prevents you from wearing a face covering, or it causes you severe distress, or there is a need to remove it to avoid injury or harm. One thing that you do need to bear in mind is if you arrive at the test centre and don't declare that you have one of those three conditions and you arrive without a face covering, your test will be cancelled. So again, if you fall into one of those categories that you're unable to wear a face covering, you must declare it when you are booking your test. Also to bear in mind that again, yes, you'll need to wear a face covering, but you'll be able to, or you'll be asked to remove your face covering when you're asked to identify you. So again, the examiner will want to see that it's you behind the face mask. So I guess some of those areas are things perhaps that we expected and don't come as a huge surprise. But again, just bear in mind about the face covering that you must wear a face covering on the day of your test. Well, again, unless there is some reason why you can't wear one. So again, there are some new rules that have come into play or will come into play that affect you during your test, and they are: if at any point during your test you have an issue with your face covering, you will be able to pull over to stop and adjust it. If you make a serious or dangerous fault, you will be immediately diverted back to the test centre to minimise the time in the car. And lastly, at the end of your test, you will be asked to get out of the vehicle to get the result, again to minimise time spent in the car, and at that point your instructor will be able to come over and get the feedback. So in terms of your driving test, one of the big areas that are just worth kind of bearing in mind is that if you were to cause a serious or dangerous fault, you will be directed immediately back to the test centre. So again, historically, if you were to get a serious or dangerous fault, you would continue through your test right to the end. But again, with the new measures in place, to minimise time in the car, you will be asked to go back to the test centre again if you were to make a serious or dangerous fault. Now again, there are a few occasions when you should not go for your driving test. So let's have a look at those now. So again, it's very similar to the theory test. So you must not go for your driving test if you or someone that you're living with has the symptoms of COVID-19. Again, if you are told to stay at home by the NHS Test and Trace Service, or that you have entered the UK in the last 14 days. Now again, if you are unable to take your driving test because of symptoms, or that someone in your house develops symptoms of COVID-19, the good news, I guess in some respects, is that you'll be able to rebook your test free of charge. There will be no cost involved. Again, historically, if you were to book your, if you were to cancel your driving test last minute, there you would have to incur the cost of that. Okay, so those are some of the changes that will be taking place in the next few weeks when it comes to both the theory and the driving test. What I will do is I'll put some links down below to, again, the signs and symptoms of COVID-19, and also some of the documents that have come out today with regards to some of these new revised social distancing measures. As always, if you are unfamiliar, you're not sure with anything that I've gone through, please feel free to post a question below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But in the meantime, thanks very much for watching. If you're able to, I'd really appreciate if you can subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon for notifications of future videos. But in the meantime, look after yourself, look forward to starting lessons again, look forward to getting back in the car, and again, I'll see you soon. Take care.